With our machine now bootstrapped, we can really go about actually managing the computer remotely back here on my desktop, our Windows 10 desktop we're working with. Here on my desktop, let's actually go then through how you would go about remotely managing that machine using Windows PowerShell and some of the command line and other remote management capabilities that now exist. Let's say, for example, that here we have need to make this machine a file server and perhaps also a Hyper-V server as well. Let's begin that process by opening up, for example, the PowerShell command prompt here and executing a couple of commands here remotely against that machine so that we can get it then configured in the way that we need. Let's say, for example, that we want to take a look at the different Windows features that exist on that machine. I just want to show you just some ways in which you can go about this remote administration. The Get Windows Feature commandlet is a tool that you can use for figuring out which roles and features are installed on a computer. And if I run it here on this machine, well, this machine, it's not going to work because this is a Windows 10 instance. I do have the abilities, though, to reference a remote computer name, which in my case would be Server 1, using this commandlet. You should be prepared for the fact that many commandlets use this computer name parameter so that you can direct it towards remote machines, but not all commandlets actually do. So you may have to kind of dig around sometimes from commandlet to figure out whether or not parameters similar to computer name actually exist for their use in remotely managing different computers with different commandlets. This will provide, as you can see here, a long list with checkboxes of the different roles and features like what we saw in the graphical user interface before. And so if I scroll up here, we can see common things like IIS and remote access and Hyper-V right here, as well as file server. Let's go ahead and install then the file server role service that corresponds with the file and storage services role. In order to do that, we have another command that we need to use that is the install Windows feature commandlet. And as before, when I do install Windows feature, I need to then direct it to that remote server. So install Windows feature with the name being fs-file server, which is what existed over there on the right-hand side. This is the name itself. For FS file server, let's address this then to the computer name being server 1. And you'll see here that if everything goes correctly, it will then reach out to that machine server 1 and begin the installation. This now goes through completing the install of that file server role service over there on that remote machine. And in fact, let me just for grins here, let's go back to Get Windows Feature and then take a look there on server 1 to confirm indeed that that role service has been correctly installed. Down here, we're waiting for the data to get collected, and then I need to scroll up to figure out where it is here in the list. You can see now that File Server does have the checkbox here to complete that installation. You will find yourself using ever more of these commandlets over time to manage the remote configuration of all of these different roles and features that exist on your server core machines. And it's worth mentioning also, too, on full GUI machines as well, those that have the full desktop experience. And also Nano Server, which we'll be talking about next. But as I said, not all the commandlets will have that dash computer name parameter. In some cases, you may need to log in, quote unquote, into the remote console in order to perform some task. I do just want to show you one other command that you should be prepared for in those situations. That is called enter PS session. Enter PS session is a command that you can use for entering literally a PS session on that remote machine. Notice here that the prompt actually changes to include server 1 there in brackets to let you know that you're running these commands on that remote computer. If you've ever had to telnet or SSH into a Linux box, this is the functional equivalent of accomplishing that task in that operating system. Because before, when I was attempting to run, for example, Get Windows Feature on Windows 10, well, that would provide me all the information locally. And because I was on Windows 10, I couldn't get any information because there are no Windows features on Windows 10. If I now run this command without any parameters in this remote session, I get functionally the same information because it's running this command locally on that machine server 1. Now, all this may seem a bit complex and actually a bit more difficult than what you may have been used to in previous versions of this OS. This whole movement towards command line and the command line basis means that there are some commandlets you're just simply going to have to memorize. But the good news is that once you have most of the configurations completed on those machines, you can then retreat back to your more comfortable traditional graphical user interfaces for the other kinds of management tasks that you're probably doing on an everyday basis. Let's head back over to Server Manager, where we can take a look at this machine that we've now then configured. Here on Server Manager, we have Server 2. We need to add in Server 1 to our list of servers to manage. So here is Server 1. If I add this in here to our list of servers to manage, I can hit OK here. We'll notice that things are going to be a little bit different between Server 1 and Server 2. Back here under File and Storage Services, there are actually quite a few more, a couple more different items that exist here than what we saw earlier with Server 2, because Server 1 now includes that File Servers role service. Right down here for Server 1, we can come down here, I believe it's under Volumes, here under Shares, where we can go about now adding a share. Notice here for Server 2, we would need to start the Add Roles and Features wizard to go through installing that File Server Role service. But over here for Server 1, if I take a look then at Server 1 itself, we then can go through and actually take a look at which shares we may want to add for that drive C. So I now have more functionality here because I've gone through the installation of that role and role service on that remote machine. Long and short here is that I just want to show you that the reality is that your knowledge of PowerShell will get you through that initial configuration, but your everyday management and dealing with these roles and features may not necessarily always involve the use of PowerShell. You have all these other graphical tools that exist here and that have existed here in the Windows Desktop OS for an extended period to continue to assist you with those management tasks.